So let me introduce myself. My name is Gregory Lassane. I'm a nurse. I'm 38 years old. I'm an MDS coordinator to be exact. I have two beautiful kids, and I'm a black man in therapy.
Hey everyone, I'm Miss Amy. You might recognize me as one of the hosts of Mud Talk, but today I'm not here in that role. Today I'm here to share with you my experiences of having somebody that I care about be a black man in therapy and my perspective on what it was like as he went through and is continuing to go through his mental health journey.
I can say that growing up, I was taught like most young boys are taught. You know, if you fall over and hurt yourself, you pick yourself up, you don't cry, stop crying, boy, or just not really showing emotions, period, or even just kind of being soft. And so over the years, for myself, for instance, just speaking on myself, it became hard because that is how I was groomed to be. I was groomed to be a man that doesn't cry, that doesn't show emotion, that holds stuff in. I never saw my father cry growing up. I never really saw my father show any type of emotions. Every once in a while, he would play with me, but for the most part, his door was always closed in the room. And so I felt secluded. I felt by myself. I felt alone. I felt closed off. And as I grew older, that's how I became. Just closed off. Not opening up because of the example that I had. My particular story starts way back when. And it kind of carried, me into adulthood. Living with my father and my stepmother and going back and forth to see my mother every weekend. My mom would come pick me up every Friday and would return me every Sunday. And I thought that was normal. I thought that every kid, did that. I never really get that, sit down and talk about it. So that was my life as I knew it. But I will say that it did bother me because every time I left my mom, it just felt like I was leaving a piece of me, if that makes sense. So it hurt, but I was tough. I mean, that's how I was raised to be. Hard. Don't cry. Don't be a wuss. And a lot of that is coming from family. And my closest family, people I'm closest with right now, my aunts and grandma. I remember being a kid and, that's kind of how it was in a black household. You don't be a certain way. There would be times where, my stepmom and I would get into it, but I would try to tell my father, and he would never listen to me or believe me. There was mental, physical, verbal abuse on top of, not being around my mom and my brother and my sister. Me being in a car when my stepmom ran over someone. I don't know if she killed the guy or not. That's just a list of some of the traumas that I've experienced. And it goes on. But you carry a lot of that. Being a kid, just holding all that stuff in. So as I held it in, as a kid, it's affected me as I've gotten older. To whereas I was shut down and trying to be a man, or the definition of what a man is supposed to be. which was, just being hard, being tough, working hard, being the man. But as a kid, you don't understand that, As a kid, you kind of go on as a kid, you go on what you're taught. So what you're taught is what you see. So when I was a kid, what I was taught is what I went by. What I saw is what I went by. So as a kid, I didn't speak about my troubles much. I held a lot of it in, a lot. Which is why therapy is helping now. It's helping me to understand that, hey, I wasn't wrong. I was right with how I felt and supposed to feel.
The more we got to know each other, the one thing that I noticed about Greg was that he's actually a really, really good listener. And at the time in my life, that's something that I needed. I needed somebody who would listen to me, hear me out. I didn't have that a lot. Being a helper and being in a helping profession is something that we related to. He was a nurse. I work in mental health. And, you don't often have people listening to you and helping you when you're in that situation because you're so used to helping others. And he was great. He's still great when it comes to listening. But the one thing that I noticed right away is that he was very, very slow to open up about his own stuff or his own emotions or certain circumstances or talk about certain parts of his life. It took a while for him to show that emotion, to be able to talk about that. He's always been great at listening to me, but that is something that I will always remember, is how hard it was for him to really open up about the things that he had going on in his life. One thing that we had at first that we definitely did not see eye to eye on was the importance of mental health. And I don't think it was because he was anti-mental health. He supported me, he respected me for what I did for a living. But I was raised that it's okay. I don't even want to say that I was raised that it's okay to talk about emotions, but talking about emotions and mental health is just normalized, I think, more in my background than it ever was in his background. And so that's the one area that I feel like we definitely did not see eye to eye when it came to when we first started hanging out and talking and becoming friends, and even honestly through a good portion of the beginning of his mental health journey.
I was with my ex-wife for, I want to say, 16 years. We were young when we got married, 25. There were red flags there that I chose to ignore because at the time I didn't understand red flags. I didn't understand mental health issues. There was a lot that I didn't understand. So my marriage was tough. It wasn't all bad times. There was good times too, and I received 2 beautiful children out of it, which is great. But there was a lot of internal issues between us. It got to the point where when I was working 2 jobs and I would work my second job, I never wanted to come home. I would sit in the parking lot after I got off work, or I would sit in the grocery store parking lot up the street from the house, preparing myself to go home because I've had anxiety of what I was walking into, because I never knew what I would be walking into. So it was tough. It was hard. But things happen. And I feel like everything happens for a reason. And whether you believe in God or you're spiritual, whatever it may be, you are strong enough to fight it. Period. I've been divorced, separated and divorced, going on 3 years now. It was the hardest decision that I've ever had to make in my life. It came between my mental health, my kids, my marriage, everything I know. And it basically came down to what is healthy for me. And being in the marriage relationship that I was in, it was not healthy, not just for me, but, for my kids as well. It just wasn't a healthy environment. And it took me many years. I was with my ex-wife for 16 years. So 16 years of going through a lot. And it wasn't all just her, but, I, am partly to blame for certain things as well. But I can definitely say that when I decided to leave and we sat down and we told our kids that, mommy and daddy are separating, when I seen my little girl cry, that was so heartbreaking. It broke my heart, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to hold her and console her and tell her that it's going to be okay, but at that moment, I didn't even know it was going to be okay. I didn't know what to expect. I went through a lot of emotions from that time up until now. I've yelled, I've cried, I've stayed up, I've done reckless behavior at times that I'm not proud of. But it was all a process.
I remember the day that he decided that him and his wife were going to separate. He had called me, and I really don't think he called me because it was like intentional, like I need to call Amy, she's going to help me through this or whatever. I genuinely think he called me out of, I don't know who else to call or what else to do. And I remember when I picked up the phone, like he was crying, and that was different. And he told me about what happened and how they were going to separate. And I was like, man, like, I'm really sorry. And I kind of listened to him and I heard him out. But the one thing that I will never forget about this, and I do think this goes back to his upbringing about not talking about emotions and mental health, he apologized, and he was apologizing for having emotions and showing emotions and being upset. And he apologized multiple times for crying on the phone.
That was definitely a tough time in my life. I was definitely depressed. I didn't know what was next. I couldn't see what my future would look like because I was lost. Everything that I known, everything that I worked for was gone. So having to rebuild again. So having to rebuild is tough. And it's even tougher when you have certain demons and you have certain internal issues going on. So at the same time, you're trying to be a better person because you want to be a better person, but you don't know how to. You don't know where to start. And everything just kind of seems like there's nothing there. There's no one to help. Even though there were plenty of people there to help, but at the time, just being depressed and going through so much of what I went through, it was a hard time. I have no problem sharing my story of me drinking. I turned to alcohol. And when I say turn to alcohol, I would drink a good 12 to 18 beers a day, give or take. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And if I didn't have beer, which I was getting beer as soon as I, got off in the morning, drinking in the morning, drinking in the afternoon, drinking at night. It was tough, drinking and driving. I'm not ashamed of it because this is my story to tell.
I remember in the days from when he decided he was going to separate, there was something that happened, and that's kind of what pushed him to separate. We were pretty much on the phone nonstop. Because the one thing that I said as a friend is and I always told him, I'm not leaving. I'm always going to be here. And anybody that knows me knows that that's in my personality. If you're my person, I'm there for you. And I talked to him on the phone. We FaceTimed. But the one thing that I don't think I was prepared for was to watch somebody who I cared about over the days and the weeks after that start to slip farther and farther down into a really deep depression. And to kind of start to spiral, and I didn't really know what to do or what to say or really just how to help. I just was I'm just going to be there. I'm just going to be there to listen and hear him out. But it was hard. I also remember being really worried about him because he, in coping with this, was still trying really hard not to show his emotions, and the coping was turning into him turning to things like alcohol. I remember calling him and I'm like, dude, what time is it? You're drinking already. Or I remember him showing me a picture of the amount of beer that he had drank, and I was like, man, that's not healthy. But on the same token, like, what do I say? And it was hard because I work in mental health. Like, I should know what to say and how to help. But it's different when it's your friend and somebody you care about. I was really worried about him too, because I could see that depression was starting to slip him into a place where, like, I don't know if he wanted to live anymore.
When you have someone trying to turn your family and friends against you, trying to make it seem like you're a bad man, a bad father, a bad person, and just telling everybody, family, friends, work, social media, and that hurt.
And oftentimes he would be like, I'm not going to do it today, but I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to do it. And that's really hard to hear. Now, remember, we live 10 hours away from each other. I can't be there. Like, I help people in the present. I help people in person. And so figuring out how I can support him 10 hours away was hard. And then to hear that, and I get it. Like, we all go through hard times. And, the separation turned into divorce, and the divorce turned into a custody battle. And, the whole time it was like watching a friend of mine, like, just face these demons and not be able to help him. And I was worried. Like, I was genuinely worried because I didn't necessarily believe that he wasn't going to try to kill himself. I think, honestly, I was worried if he wasn't going to do it intentionally, it was going to be because of the alcohol or because he got in a car accident because he'd been drinking and driving. It was really scary. It was hard.
I got to the point where I wanted to commit suicide, and I was ready to do it. I had a plan. I was going to, I had found a bridge, and I was going to either drive off or just jump off the bridge. People were calling me. Family, friends were calling me, texting me. I was not picking up because in my head, I decided that this will stop the pain. This will stop the hurt. I will be free. And I was going to go through it. And then about 10:30 at night, my daughter texted me and said, "I love you, Daddy," with a heart. And that just kind of snapped me out of it. That made me realize I need to be here for my kids.
I remember the day that he decided that he was going to take his own life. I'm sorry, hold on. I remember I hadn't talked to him all day, and that's not like him, because remember, we've been on the phone and we were calling and FaceTiming all the time, and I was really worried about him. Like, he was in a depression like no other, and he was drinking, and he couldn't tell me if he was going to be safe. And I remember this is a time when, like, his ex-wife wasn't letting him, like, see the kids, and he was just not in a good place. And I remember I hadn't talked to him all day. And I was trying to get a hold of him, and I just, like, couldn't get a hold of him. And I didn't know what to do. I remember he had turned off his location on his phone, and that was something that I was, like, really worried about. So I'm trying to figure out where he is. I'm blowing his messages up. I'm texting him. And finally, like, around 10:30, 10:45 at night, I get this really bizarre phone call, and I, like, picked up immediately. And he was just bawling his eyes out. And he was drinking, and I was like, dude, I'm worried about you. Like, where are you? And remember, we're 10 hours away, and he was like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to live this life anymore. And I remember thinking, like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Because he's 10 hours away from me. I can't just go get him. And at this time, like, I knew one of his friends' names, one. And luckily it was like a kind of a unique name. And I was like, somebody has to go get him. Like, he couldn't even tell me where he was. Or I don't know, maybe he chose not to. All right, and then he hung up the phone. Like, he was just like, I gotta go. And now, hindsight, I know that was because his daughter texted him. But in the meantime, I'm, like, blowing up his phone again, like, call me. And I searched his friend with the unique name on Instagram, and I've never talked to this person in my life. I just happened to know his name. I maybe talked to him here and there, like, over phone. And I messaged him, and I said, hey, do you know where Greg is? And he was like, I've been trying to get a hold of him all day, and so is his mom. Do you know where he is? I said, yeah, he just called me. And I said, I need someone to help. Like, I don't know how to get him. And at the same time that I'm messaging him, he calls me back. And I was like, finally got him. I said, where are you? And he told me, because he said, that's when he told me my daughter called me. And he's bawling his eyes out. And he's like, I can't do this. And I remember texting his friend, and his friend texted his mom. And I remember two of his boys growing up jump in the car and like rushed over to the parking lot while I'm like trying to talk to him and explain to him that he's worth it. Like, he's worth living for. That was hard. I almost lost my best friend that night. But I think everything happens for a reason, and this baby girl saved his life, and he called me and he let me help him. I know that was a turning point. I know it was a turning point. It wasn't when he decided to start going to therapy, but it was when he decided that he needed to live, and he needed to live for his kids. And although he had a really long journey after that before he actually started addressing this in therapy, I do believe that was a turning point. That was the point when he said, I have to live and I need to get a hold of this. And that was one of the hardest days of my life as a friend and as somebody who loves somebody who's going through something. I'm glad he's here. I'm glad he chose to stay.
I will say my friend Amy has been there from the very beginning. She would always encourage me to go to therapy. And I didn't want to go. I was very reluctant to go because I'm like, what are they going to tell me that I don't already know? Like, about myself and about what's going on. But and I kept that mindset for a while, and the whole time I was doing that, I was spiraling downhill. Separation, pending divorce, ex-wife, doing everything she can to tarnish my name and reputation, keeping the kids from me. So I was going through a lot. Drinking heavily, very heavily. 12 to 18 beers a day, or liquor, just whatever I can get my hands on. So yeah, it was a lot, and I was still like, fuck it, I'm not going. But day by day, Amy never judged me. She just encouraged me. She listened. And I thought about it.
I'm so proud of him. I am. He's come a long way. Even after that time, I'm yelling at him, you need to go to therapy, you need to go to therapy, you need to go to therapy. And he just wasn't ready yet. And, but I knew if I just was continuing to explain to him how much more he could be getting out of life and how much more he could be growing, that eventually he would make that decision, that he would go.
Say it was a tough road. It was tough. But I know if I can get through it, anybody can. I will say I was hesitant to start therapy at first because I'm like, for what? What's it going to help? What are they going to tell me? Then also in the back of my head, I was thinking like, well, does that make me crazy if I'm going to therapy? Because the stigma was, if you have mental health problems, then you're crazy. When that's not it at all. Sometimes you just need an outlet. It took a lot of convincing from a few friends, but eventually I chose to seek help. And it was one of the best things I've ever done, to be honest. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, to let my guard down and to expose my inner self. But I'm building myself up. And this will help me be a better man, a better person, a better father, a better spouse to in my next relationship. But it's tough. There's times where you might want to stop going because you don't want to hear the truth. But it is good, and to change your whole thought process, because sometimes people act the way that they do because they didn't have the tools that we have, vice versa.
The day that he told me that he got himself a counselor, I was so happy. But I remember looking at him and telling him, like, it's going to be hard work, and therapy always is harder before it gets easier. And something that makes me so happy now is that, like, he'll text me and be like, hey, I had a therapy session today, and I don't need to know what they talk about. All I know is that, like, he's always telling me I had a therapy session, and it feels good. It feels good in, like, a way that, like, I can get things out, and I feels good to be growing and changing. And I've seen the growth, and I've seen the change in him, not only just as a human, but as a friend, as a parent, as a caregiver. It's just amazing the amount of growth that he's had because he's choosing to put in the work.
I can tell you that it is not easy. It's not for the weak. It is hard. There's a lot of emotions and feelings that you have to experience that you've never experienced before. I can say that me being a black man, I started therapy. I go once a week, and it has helped. It definitely has helped me see things from different perspectives, different points of views, not just for myself, but from how, let's say, my ex-wife or my father or my mother looked at things. Because I see things from my perspective, my point of view, but when you get in therapy, it kind of opens you up. It makes you vulnerable, and it's a lot. It's a tough process for anybody. It's especially a hard process because from when we're young, especially being black men, we're told to be tough, toughen up, don't cry, don't show emotions. If you fall and scrape your knee, you brush it off and you keep on moving, And if you do cry, if you do show emotions, then you're soft, you're a bitch, or whatever names have you. When in retrospect, it's far from it. But being a black man in therapy, I can say definitely helps. I myself encourage it. I have no problem telling people about my story, about my journey, and about me going to therapy. At first, I was kind of embarrassed about it because that's how it's made to seem, like in the black community, black and brown community, it's always like you prayed away your demons or whatever you have going on, or just a bunch of other things. But sometimes you need professional help, whether it's medication, whether it's therapy. Sometimes you just need that help. You need to get it out. Mental health is not talked about in the black and brown community like it should be. I do applaud Charlamagne the God and others that are bringing it to the forefront, especially for black men, and telling black men it's okay to cry, it's okay to be upset, it's okay to show emotions. And that's what I do with my kids, especially my son. He's 9, and I always tell him, I always try to talk to him. Whenever I get my kids, I always ask them, are you happy, are you sad, anything you need to talk about, anything new going on, or just whatever. Sometimes they talk to me, sometimes they don't, but at times they open up and they talk and they cry about how upset they are due to certain circumstances. But that is a healthy environment for them to be able to express their feelings and emotions without feeling any kind of backlash. And that is something that I wish that I had as a kid. So once again, it's just all about breaking generational curses. You know, the change has to start with you.
I think the best advice that I can give somebody, and this is coming from somebody who didn't grow up in the Black community, so I don't have any advice to give on that as far as like what that looks like. But one of the best advices that I can give somebody that cares about somebody who has struggles with mental health or trauma is that you just have to be present. You don't have to have the answers. Just be present and don't be judgmental. And like genuinely don't be judgmental. Don't tell people's business. Just listen. See, sometimes we can't solve everything that's happened, but we can be somebody who sits with somebody as they deal with the things that they're dealing with. And that's what I've done a lot with him, honestly, other than encouraging him to go to counseling and giving him some advice here and there. But quite honestly, my role in caring about somebody with mental health struggles is just simply to help sit with him as he goes through the healing process. He's come a long way, and I'm so proud of him.
Everybody's journey is going to be different, and I will say that for some people, it's mental health therapy. For some people, it's just writing things down. Sometimes it feels good to write your emotions out. Start a journal. At the end of the day, before bed, just write in a journal how you feel. There's many different outlets. You just have to find your niche. But yeah, it's possible. I'm living proof that mental health has helped me as a Black man, as a father, and as a future spouse. And it will continue. And it's not going to happen overnight. Sometimes you need ongoing therapy for years because you have so much trauma that you don't even know about. Or you might know about it, but you think it's normal. But when you go to therapy, or when you start doing your research or just whatever, you'll find out a lot of things that has happened to you, that was said to you or done to you in the past when you were younger, a kid, teenager, that it wasn't right. But because that's what you were used to seeing, you just felt that it was right. But a lot of it isn't. And we, as Black men, have to want to change and break these generational curses. And it's tough. But I encourage all my Black and brown men to go seek mental health therapy. Or if you're not ready to go that far, you could always, like I said, write things down. Or maybe just have that one person to talk to, which is good, but they're not a professional. So they can give you their opinion on things, but not like a professional can. So I encourage all Black men, Black and brown men, all men in general, to go seek mental health therapy. You will not regret it. Trust me. Peace and love to everybody.